You're listening to The Stephen Torriello Show, building a platform of liberty for people in search of truth with a dash of hope and a life worth living. The Stephen Torriello Show. And now, here's Stephen.
So it seems as if Democrats only want unity as long as it's against Donald Trump. And as far as I could see, Donald Trump actually wants unity for America. And I could prove this. I give you the Bernie Trump voter. The Bernie Trump voter came through for Donald Trump in 2016, and I think we're going to see a similar coalition this election as well. I'm starting to see a lot of good trends for Donald Trump and the Make America Great Again movement, this real coalition from both sides. I mean, you have Democrats coming on board, you have Republicans coming on board with a common goal of just saving America, getting it off of this path of self-destruction, coming together and working on issues that actually impact Americans' lives. I mean, you have disaffected Democrats, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and you have disaffected Republicans, the anti-establishment, anti-rhino Republicans, joining forces to form this new party under this ginormous tent that everybody's invited to. And I'm starting to see some really interesting things take place. It's unfortunate that the media moves so fast that we don't really have time to talk about important issues that have happened. I don't even think we discussed the RFK Jr. endorsement. That was something that I thought was huge. That is a big freaking deal, man. A lot bigger than I think people realize, because it brings a certain demographic on board to this new coalition that just wasn't there before RFK Jr. And I want to kind of explain this to you. Have you guys ever heard of the Horseshoe Theory? So the Horseshoe Theory, here's a picture of it. So the Horseshoe Theory is demographics. So at the top, you have, just think of non-political people that are in the center. They don't go right, they don't go left, but they do vote. They have their own demographic. And then when you look at the sides of the horseshoe, you have the left and the right, the widest part of the horseshoe. So they could not be any further apart. But then when you start getting towards the bottom of the horseshoe, where the horseshoe actually starts coming back to the center again, you have the far right and the far left. And now this theory came out, I think, back in the 1970s. So it's been around for a while. But what it shows is that the far left and the far right do share some commonalities. And one of those commonalities is anti-establishment, anti-war, anti-big pharma. This is something we're starting to notice coming together right now. And hence Tulsi Gabbard, anti-war, and RFK Jr., anti-pharma, anti-big ag, anti-big corporations, anti-establishment. And that is pretty much where the Bernie Trump voter came from, was disaffected Democrats that just wanted to see the establishment burn down to the ground. And I'm starting to see all these people come together, believe it or not. And it's weird that that's exactly what people wanted. For the longest time, we always talked about how we just wanted both sides to come together and just focus on the issues that are impacting people's lives. Well, that's exactly what's happening. But it's happening under Donald Trump. And I think these people, they want their cake and eat it too. It's like, oh yeah, we want this coalition party. We want Democrats and Republicans to come together, but we don't want Donald Trump. Well, I'm sorry, it just doesn't work that way. And I've said this many times before, is unconventional leaders come in unconventional times. And if it takes Donald Trump to create a coalition administration, to create this movement where partisan politics are set aside and people come together, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. They come together just to fix the issues for the American people to better this country, then I'm all on board. And in fact, this is something I'm starting to notice, which brought me to the Horseshoe Theory. So I found this really interesting article. We talked about this on the audio version of the podcast. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing like I did on that episode because we have other stuff to get into. I just want to touch base on this article because there's a lot of key pieces of information in here. So during Donald Trump's first administration, the one thing that he was lacking was a transition team. He did not have the appropriate transition team that met our goals. Essentially, he had pro-establishment, rhino Republican people. You can't really say Kellyanne Conway. I guess you kind of can. I like her. I have nothing against her. I don't know her personally, but I have nothing against her other than her husband being an absolute pansy. He's the one that's been targeting Donald Trump, big anti-Trump guy. He's the one that was involved in the E. Jean Carroll case. He was the one that suggested E. Jean Carroll file a lawsuit against Donald Trump. But anyways, in this article, it talks about the Horseshoe Theory. And when you go through here, it starts talking about Donald Trump's first administration, and then it starts getting into the pattern that I've noticed, the disaffected Bernie Trump voter that helped him get elected in 2016, and I'm starting to see the Bernie Trump voter coming back around. And that is where RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard come into play, and I'm going to explain it in a second. So neither Kennedy nor Gabbard were part of this crossover demographic in 2016. Their transformations have taken place over a longer gestation period. Further complicating matters, Kennedy has claimed that he did not endorse Sanders in 2016, even though the podcast he co-hosted at the time did. Gabbard, on the other hand, very publicly and pointedly endorsed Sanders in 2016, resigning her post as DNC vice chair. She embraced Bernie Sanders pretty publicly. I mean, she was all for Bernie back then. I think Bernie Sanders is a coward. I think the guy is a sellout. He sold his soul for a buck because he wanted to be part of the cool team. And now look at him. I think he's like the perfect example of what happens to somebody when they sell their soul for a shilling. I think he got screwed out of the nomination process for Hillary Clinton by the DNC, and he didn't do a damn thing about it because they let him be part of the cool club. And a shame on him. I don't see how anybody could support Bernie Sanders. And in fact, all this is part of his doing. This whole Inflation Reduction Act, this inflationary spending, this is Elizabeth Warren, this is Bernie Sanders. He's part of the pro-establishment now. So imagine that. You shout from the rooftops how much you hate the establishment, and then at the first sign the establishment wants to bring you on board, you say yes. It's so incredible, man. They're all a bunch of frauds, Bernie Sanders included. So anyways, going into this, Tulsi Gabbard was very heavily supportive of Bernie Sanders, and where is she now? Supporting Donald Trump. And it goes in, it says there are a few core principles that define Bernie Trump voters as a group, many of which can be heard from Kennedy and Gabbard. Skepticism of institutions, skepticism of big business, opposition to foreign military intervention, distrust of the quote-unquote establishment, or the use of words like uniparty. It isn't hard to understand why figures who were drawn to Sanders for those reasons might drift to Trump today. Yes, this is where RFK Jr. and Gabbard come into play. Like I said, I'm starting to see this amazing, exciting new coalition starting to unfold right in front of our eyes. And it's happening on Trump's side, not Democrats' side. This is what I find so amazing. So for all the naysayers saying Donald Trump was divisive, Donald Trump was this, well, who's actually bringing the two parties together? Who's actually listening to Democrats like RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard? RFK Jr. actually reached out to the Kamala Harris campaign before Donald Trump's campaign, right? And he reached out and he said, listen, these are the issues I want to work on. And you can listen to his interview. He talked about this. These are the issues I want to work on, and if you bring me onto your cabinet in the Kamala Harris administration, I will endorse you. They ignored him. They didn't even respond back to him. He goes to Donald Trump, and apparently they sat down and had a pretty good conversation multiple times, and that's exactly what's in this article that I want to get into. This is what is so good and appealing about Donald Trump is that he listens. He listens to the other side. The guy doesn't pretend to know it all, and he actually wants to fix things the way that they should be fixed. And he listens to people that know what they're talking about. That's what I like about Donald Trump, is that he actually will listen and he'll change his mind. Like, he is persuadable if it comes from somebody that he trusts, like an RFK Jr. or a Tulsi Gabbard. And this is why this administration is going to be historic like I said, I'm pretty super excited about it. It gives me chills just thinking about it. That this giant coalition party where we're all under this big tent, Republicans and Democrats, and we're just working together to save this country. I think it's amazing. Anyways, to get back into this, it says, in many ways, the appointment of Kennedy and Gabbard to Trump's transition effort is the fulfillment of Steve Bannon's long-held dream of a populist Republican Party that united anti-establishment voices on both sides of the aisle. Bannon, a disaffected Democrat himself, much like me, cultivated both Kennedy and Gabbard during his time in Trump's inner circle, bringing both in for Trump Tower meetings during the transition. Quote, he loves Tulsi Gabbard, loves her. A source familiar with Bannon's thinking told The Hill in 2016. I don't like this whole sources familiar with Bannon's thinking. What does that even mean, man? Like, does that mean I'm considered a source because I'm familiar with Trump's thinking? I hate when they do this stuff, man. Anyways, I digress. Let's move on. It doesn't matter. He wants to work with her on everything. She reportedly considered for posts including UN Ambassador and Secretary of State of Defense. All three posts went to more globalist, non-populist voices. And they're talking about Donald Trump's first administration. So Bannon has also praised Sanders in the past. Quote, I like Bernie, he told Bill Maher in 2020, and explicitly targeted his voters. Quote, either don't vote or vote for Trump, Bannon urged Sanders supporters in the same interview. The Bernie people helped make Trump president, and they're going to help make Trump president again, because he's been screwed by the Democratic Party, the same party that screwed over the Bernie Sanders supporters. The populist mastermind is now unavailable for interview because he's in prison. So he dialed up the next best source, which is Raheem Kassam, a top lieutenant who worked for Bannon first as an editor at Breitbart and more recently as a co-host of his War Room podcast. All right, I'm going to try and skip to the good stuff. So the Kennedy-Gabbard faction goes by many names, depending on who you ask. Contrarian cranks, doves, independents. These are people who think about what their clothes are made of. He explained they don't want to wear polyester. They don't want to eat seed oils. They prefer all natural, no sulfites in their wines. These are like the Roganites, the Joe Roganites, the people that listen to Rogan's podcast and will vote for whoever Rogan endorses. There's no doubt about that. Or at least whoever Rogan says is the better candidate. There are also, of course, the original anti-vaxxers, and COVID has helped engineer some of these shifts. Members of this demographic tend to side with Trump on the pandemic-era culture wars, in addition to sharing his stated opposition to actual wars. Quote, our children are now the unhealthiest, sickest children in the world, Kennedy, the nation's leading vaccine skeptic, said in Phoenix last week as he offered Trump his endorsement. Quote, do you want healthy children? Don't you want the chemicals out of our food? And don't you want the regulatory agencies to be free from corporate corruption? That was Kennedy. And yes to all three of those. And you can start to see the kind of people that are going to be attracted to RFK Jr. that are now most likely going to be voting for Donald Trump. This kind of not really in the politics, but are into actually seeing issues fixed, but want somebody that understands those issues like RFK Jr. RFK Jr. understands the healthcare industry, the big pharma, the big ag, and he certainly understands the bureaucratic establishment inside Washington, D.C. And so you can see why RFK Jr.'s pretty appealing to a lot of these people that just want clean air, clean water. There is a certain demographic out there like that care about what they eat, that are kind of the health nuts, I guess you could say. So Kassam told me that this focus on health was the missing piece to understand what drives the Bernie Trump voter, and that Trump, for the first time, was paying attention to it. Quote, probably more than any point in his life, Trump is on a learning trajectory right now, said Kassam, who has ties to the campaign. I think he probably looked at it originally from like, okay, I'm for no war. Are you for no war? And they go, yeah, we're for no war. Okay. So what else are you into? And they started talking about all this health stuff and everything else. He said, I had no idea. And I kind of screwed that up. But what he's essentially saying is, for the first time, I think RFK Jr. and Donald Trump sat down together and started having these conversations and sharing ideas with one another. They realized that they actually have a lot in common. And again, this is the Horseshoe Theory, where the far left and the far right actually share a common ground with one another. Do they agree on everything? No. But the things they do agree on, maybe we can focus on those. And they're actually pretty big deals. Like, massive government censorship, like big agriculture, big pharma, all the FDA, the public-private partnerships and the EPA and the FDA and all that stuff. You know how the pharmaceutical companies are holding hands with the federal government and there's money exchanged back and forth for patents and so on and so forth. Well, those type of people share a lot in common with Trump voters because Trump voters don't like those people either. I mean, who has been the biggest anti-vaxxers in the last 5 years? Trump voters. Who are the ones that are being censored online all the time about talking crap about the vaccine? Trump voters. And so you could see how this coalition is starting to form. And I think it just took Kennedy and Trump to sit down with one another and talk about these things. So Kassam said that Trump acknowledges that he is less than ideal messenger for these arguments. He is still eating quarter pounders and flying on planes every day, which is why he has recruited surrogates like Kennedy and Gabbard to reach these voters. His campaign now has 6 people who could credibly talk to anti-establishment podcasters, with more viewers than nightly network news. Trump himself, his eldest sons, Vance, Kennedy, and Gabbard. Indeed, Trump has been making the rounds on these podcasts lately. Another clear play for the vast audience who doesn't traditionally vote Republican and gets their news from offbeat sources. Most recently, he sat down for an unusually personal interview with comedian Theo Von, including a long discussion on the health lobby, cocaine, and alcohol. Von's previous political guest, in the episode he recorded 1 week before while supporting a tie-dye Grateful Dead shirt, you guessed it, Bernie Sanders. The UR podcaster of this demographic is Joe Rogan. The Atlantic put it, Rogan and Von's shows plow the great crunchy intersection at the middle of the American politics, where the supplement bros of the right find communion with the wellness vegetarians on the left. Just don't let them talk to each other about vaccines. Von and Rogan both have a weakness for Sanders and RFK Jr. As The Atlantic reported, Rogan hosted Sanders for an interview in 2019 and endorsed him the next year. Looking ahead, Kassam told me that he expects Trump to sit for a Rogan interview in the last week of October. The ultimate October surprise for Bernie Trump voters. This is big news. And I have a feeling there's going to be some other big named Democrats coming out and supported Donald Trump and endorsing him around the same time in October. And so what I think the Trump campaign is doing is they're trying to show the country that it's the Trump camp that actually wants a real coalition administration where Democrats and Republicans come together and work on the issues together to help the American people to better this country, to shift the direction this country's going in. And if that takes Democrats and Republicans sharing their ideas and at least sharing what they do agree with and trying to work on the things they don't agree on, then I think that is the party for the American people. I'm sorry. But the Kamala Harris campaign isn't offering any substance. They're not offering any unity other than unity against Donald Trump. And so, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that gets people excited, man, to actually see this type of coalition unfolding in this tent. So to be clear, none of this is anything new. The team Horseshoe Theory, referring to the idea that the far left and the far right are more near sides of a horseshoe than opposite ends of the spectrum, dates back to 1972. Yes, we already said that. So to go down... So according to Kennedy, as honorary transition co-chairs, he and Gabbard will help pick the people who will be running the government. That's big. At the Phoenix rally, Trump noted that millions and millions of Americans who want clean air, clean water, and a healthy nation have concerns about toxins in our environment and pesticides in our food, pledging to appoint a panel of experts who will work with Kennedy on these issues. But the last time Trump supposedly promised to bring Kennedy into his administration, it was seemingly squashed by other advisors. As ever, Trump enjoys pitting different factions against each other. As Kassam put it, Trump's current campaign managers, Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, who are expected to play a hand in staffing a potential administration, are from the traditional Republican operative mold, the Kellyanne Conway 1.0. The transition's 2 official co-chairs are the business executives Howard Lunick and Linda McMahon. So think Kushner from the last time around. Famously, the Heritage Foundation and constellation of other conservative groups are also making transition plans. So Kassim described Kennedy and Gabbard as a very needed counterbalance to these more corporatist mainline conservative figures. He also noted that the Trump transition team will be privately funded, having opted not to take the federal money available to it, which he said created further need for the populist bulwark against potential donor influences. And so Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., so the Donald Trump transition team is not even taking the funds available to them for their transition team. Why? Because they don't want any donor influence. They don't want anybody they have to return favors for. This is amazing, man. Like, this is exactly what people have been looking for this entire time. This is what I'm saying. It's like you finally have a coalition starting to unfold. You finally have a party that has accepted both sides into this tent to work on ideas that actually impact people's lives. And they hate him. They want to throw him in jail. They're trying to destroy him. Now you have another party that's sitting there talking about everything hate Trump. There's no policies, no substance to anything. It's 100% pure emotions. And we're supposed to not want to vote for the other side that's bringing on Democrats and Republicans to actually work on issues that are affecting people's lives? It doesn't make sense, man. I mean, this is exactly what we've been asking for the last 20 years. Was for both sides to come together and actually work on things that are affecting people's lives to better this country. And when it finally happens, we don't want it. We say, oh, no, but it can't be Donald Trump that does it. No way, man. No way. I don't care if it was Donald Trump that did it. I wouldn't even care if it was Kamala Harris that did it. But as of right now, it's Donald Trump that's bringing this coalition administration together. A true administration that will focus on issues from both sides of the aisle. This is amazing. By listening to people like RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard when it comes to the military-industrial complex, and RFK when it comes to chemicals in our food, when it comes to chronic disease in children, when it comes to the public-private partnership between the FDA and the federal government and bureaucrats, this is exactly what people wanted. And to sit there and say we don't want it now because it's all being led by Donald Trump is insane. It's just insane, man. So here it is. It gets into some numbers. Equally unclear is the influence Kennedy and Gabbard will wield in the multi-factional Trump universe is the size of the electoral segment they might bring to him. I think they're going to bring a crap ton of people. I think they're going to bring all the independents. I just told my wife this. I think this faction of RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, I think they're going to bring the independents. I think they're going to bring the people that didn't want to vote for Donald Trump but would vote for RFK because they like what RFK stands for, the environment, the chemicals in food, yada, yada, yada. We already talked about that. So I think this election is going to bring a lot of people on board that they are totally not counting in these polls. I think it's going to bring a lot of unexpected voters to the polls, people they're not even polling, that they have no contact with. They're not counted for in the polls. The independents, the disaffected Democrats, the Bernie Trump voters, the people that just want to see unity in this country, the people that are tired of the insanity like boys in women's bathrooms and boys competing in women's sports, all that stuff. The sane, rational people, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, I think they see this new MAGA coalition being created with Gabbard and RFK and, like I said, 2 or 3 other prominent Democrats that are going to be coming out by October. And hint, hint, October surprise. I think people are going to be pretty shocked about, and I'm still doing research on it. I'll share that with you when I get it done. But it says estimates pegged that the Bernie Trump vote in 2016 had anywhere from 6 to 12% of the Sanders backers. But it is unclear how many of these voters are still Democrats or independents. It's possible that many of them are by now simply reliable Trump voters. Maybe, but I guarantee they don't know how to do polls. I guarantee they don't know how to poll them. So the demographic can seem awfully reminiscent of the need for chaos voters identified in 2023 by the political scientist Michael Bang Peterson. These voters who are expressed agreement with statements such as, when I think about our political and social institutions, I cannot help thinking, just let them all burn. Peterson calculated that these voters who are deeply suspicious of authority, Sanders, Kennedy, Gabbard, and Trump, all come to mind. To make up 5% of the electorate, not a huge slice, but more than enough to impact an election. That is also approximately the amount of support Kennedy had in the polls before suspending his campaign. Yes, he had about 4 to 8% in the polls, and that could make up the election, folks. That could separate Donald Trump from Kamala Harris by a wide margin. These voters are also, in all likelihood, among the hardest to detect in surveys, just like I said, due to their distrust of pollsters and the media writ large and general aversion to politics. They are not people who would consider likely voters, although Trump proved in 2016 that sometimes unlikely voters vote. They are certainly a group that receives little media attention. Vaughn, for example, has basically never received coverage in the New York Times, despite hosting a top 5 podcast, boasting almost 3 million subscribers. This is another thing I think the pollsters are undercounting, is the little to no effect the media has on people that have been watching alternative media outlets like Russell Brand, like Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan. I think back during the 2020 election, I think a lot of people still trusted the media like CNN, ABC, Fox News, NBC. But I think a lot of those people since 2020 have learned that the media lies, that the media cannot be trusted. And I think that's why you see the numbers in podcasts and video platforms, alternative media outlets have going through the roof. Joe Rogan and podcasts like Theo Vaughn, Ben Shapiro, just Russell Brand in particular, they get more viewerships in a day than all the media outlets combined. And so I think they're not calculating this. And I think the more people watch alternative media outlets and start breaking away from the consensus of CNN and NBC, I think they're going to vote for Donald Trump. I think they're going to see this coalition forming, this awesome tent of people from all parties, from all walks of life, come together to elect a coalition government. That's what I see. I don't see it as voting for Donald Trump and getting Donald Trump. I see it as voting for Donald Trump to get RFK's ideas, to get Tulsi Gabbard's ideas, to get Democrat ideas, to get leftist ideas and right-wing ideas, to get it all. Just throw all the ideas out there and let's actually work on what we agree on. And then we'll put the stuff we don't agree on to the side. And let's start making this country better. I think this is extremely exciting. I can't even begin to tell you what I think this is going to mean in the election. For Donald Trump and this new coalition like RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, for them not to take the transition money, the funds that they are allotted, just like any other transition team takes, to bring on new characters, to vet people, for them not to take that because they don't want any outside influence as far as like donors and special interests, that to me should tell everybody they need to know about the direction this administration is going. They don't want outside favors because they want to be able to do what they can do. And I think RFK Jr. is going to bring in voters. I think Tulsi Gabbard's going to bring in voters. I think Donald Trump's going to bring in his base. All these people are going to come together under one tent. We're going to be having fun over here, having this big party, celebrating, drinking beer, having fun. And then the left is going to be on the other side of the street saying, man, they look like they're having fun. They're going to be over there saying, man, why these people are so mean. These people, they're so depressed. They're mad all the time. They're yelling at me for dead naming somebody. They're asking me to call a man a woman. And I think it's kind of lame over here. It looks like they're having fun over there. And then they're going to take their beer and they're going to go walk over to that tent. And that's going to be the MAGA coalition. The RFKs, the Tulsi Gabbards, and the Trumps, all underneath this giant tent trying to save America. I can't think of anything better, man. And I said this in the audio version of the podcast. There's just something there that I'm seeing, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's something amazing, man. I don't think they're accounting for this massive influx of people from all walks of life coming in, and they're going to pull that lever for Donald Trump. And I don't want people to get complacent. I don't want people to get hubris because that will be your downfall. But I think there's something big on the horizon, especially if Donald Trump stays on track. He destroys Kamala Harris in this debate. He moves this, he starts bringing on more Democrats like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK. I think this is going to be an amazing thing. So the Horseshoe Theory, to go all the way back full circle, the Horseshoe Theory is a sound theory. It does hold water. And I think the extreme left and the extreme right do share common ideas with one another. And those ideas are anti-establishment, anti-war, anti-big pharma, anti-chemicals in food, pro-health, anti-vaccine, all of it. And I think they're all going to be pulling the lever for Donald Trump because Kamala Harris doesn't offer anything. In fact, the Democrats have gone more pro-war, pro-establishment, pro-billionaire, pro-millionaire, pro-corporate greed. Like they have become everything they claim to hate, which is crazy. I mean, when you listen to Kamala Harris's speech talking about how we're going to build back the military and we're going to be the fiercest military on the face of the planet, it's like, what? Like, it's like all this is lies. I mean, she's just essentially coming out now and they're just lying to people to try and trick them into voting for her. Then as soon as she gets elected, she's going to turn into a radical leftist that she's always been. And so I think people are starting to catch on. I think they're starting to see, just so long as we keep informing our fellow Americans, we keep putting it out there and we tell them what's going on, I think people are going to fix this country. You know, it was Winston Churchill that once said the one thing that he admired about the American people is their ability to pull the country back, almost like right when the country seems like it's going to go over that cliff. The American people always seem to find a way to pull it back over. And I think that's a pretty good definition of where we're at right now. I think we are on the precipice of some type of collapse. I think we are on the edge of the cliff. And voting for Kamala Harris would be kind of like that nudge that kind of just pushes us over. But I do have faith in my American people, man. I do have faith in my fellow men that they see what's going on and they're not going to allow this insanity to continue on into this realm, this era of destruction, this kind of era of self-suicide where we just vote for our own destruction. I don't see the American people doing that to themselves. I just don't. Maybe I have more faith in them than other people, but I just don't see the American people voting for this stuff, man. I just don't. And then that actually brought me into this article from the New York Times about Donald Trump's transition team. And you know how a lot of people out there were talking about, oh, Donald Trump is part of Project 2025? It's like the only thing I keep hearing from the left, my leftist friends, my leftist colleagues, the one thing that they always repeat is, oh, Donald Trump's part of Project 2025. And I'm trying to tell them, no, he is not. Nowhere around Project 2025 will you see Donald Trump's name. He's never endorsed Project 2025. I'm part of Project 2025. And I would know if Donald Trump was this major key player in Project 2025. He's just not. And I actually have an article here from the New York Times. So check this out. So it's titled, Well Behind Schedule, Trump Names Allies to Lead Transition Team. This actually came out on August 16th. So quite a while ago. So as former President Donald Trump has appointed two of his friends and financial backers to oversee a transition team preparing for his potential return to power. The move comes as polls show that his once commanding lead evaporated after President Biden dropped out of the election and Vice President Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee. The two chairs of the Trump transition, Linda E. McMahon and Howard Lutnick, will oversee efforts to identify and vet potential political appointees and draft executive orders and other plans to implement Mr. Trump's policy proposals, including a sweeping crackdown on immigration and raising tariffs on imported goods. The selection of the two, which the Trump campaign announced on Friday, was notable for several reasons. As a matter of timing, it came months after typical presidential campaigns start working on contingency planning to ensure a smooth transition should its candidate win the election. And here we go. It was also striking that neither Miss McMahon nor Mr. Lutnick has been associated with Project 2025. So there you go. Donald Trump is not connected to Project 2025 at all. And in fact, this was a fact check by CNN, of all places. When at the DNC, you had a speaker mention Project 2025 and Donald Trump. And even CNN had to come out and call BS on this. Here, check this out.
Listen to this claim from Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester of Delaware about Project 2025 and former President Trump.
He has, with his friends, said the quiet parts out loud, but not only said them out loud, he wrote a book about it. What's it called? Project 2025.
That is false. Trump did not write Project 2025. The project's big policy document published by the Heritage Foundation think tank lists dozens of people as authors, editors, contributors. Donald Trump is not among them.
So there you go. I don't know how much it's going to take to convince people that Donald Trump has nothing to do with Project 2025. He has his own platform. I don't know what it's called. I think it's called Platform 47 or something like that. He has his own platform. It's like 16 pages. It's really efficient. It's effective, and it goes through his policies one by one by one. But Democrats use this whole Project 2025 to fearmonger people because they don't have any policies. I mean, every time you talk to somebody on the left that's voting for Kamala Harris and you ask them, well, what's your favorite policy from Kamala Harris? They don't know. They don't know because she has none. And the only policies that we actually got leaks about were government price controls and $25,000 in money for a new house. So she hasn't released any of her policies. Her website to this day has no policies on it. And so Kamala voters, they don't know what her policies are. They're running 100% on pure emotions. It is a anti-Trump vote, is all it is. There's no substance. There's no policies. It doesn't make sense. And this is why during the DNC convention, they mentioned Donald Trump's names like 400 times. But they mentioned the wall like 10 times. They mentioned inflation once, I think, if even once. I think I was looking at the chart. I don't even think they mentioned inflation one time. They mentioned the border and immigration like 5 times or something like that. So it's crazy. But they mentioned Donald Trump 400 times. And during the RNC, Donald Trump mentioned Biden twice. So you could see where their party's going. Like, it has turned into this anti-Trump coalition versus Donald Trump's coalition is Democrats like RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, the Libertarian Party, right? You have the Libertarian Party coming out and endorsing Donald Trump, saying that we must get Donald Trump elected because Democrats have turned into this human wrecking ball. Like, the Democrat Party of today is a human pandemic. I mean, this party is the most destructive political force this country's ever seen. And when you have people like RFK joining forces, people like Tulsi Gabbard, who endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2016, by the way, who was the former vice chair of the DNC, and she's coming out and endorsing Donald Trump, I think people need to start paying attention. I think this coalition that's starting to form in the Republican Party, this MAGA coalition with Democrats and Republicans, I think this is amazing. I think it's exactly what people have been wanting to see for the last 20 years, and we finally have it. And people are what? They don't want it because it's Donald Trump? No. Unconventional leaders come in unconventional times. If voting for Donald Trump is what it's going to take to bring people together and actually focus on the issues and impacting people's lives, then I'll do it. I'll vote for it. I have no problem. And I guarantee you there's millions of other people that feel just like me. Republican, Democrat, I don't care. If your goal is to start fixing the issues plaguing people's lives, like whether it's dirty air, dirty water, climate change, the environment, healthy foods, the chronic disease crisis in children, whatever it is, I agree with all of that stuff. It's how we get there. And if you have somebody like Donald Trump who's willing to listen to somebody like RFK and Tulsi Gabbard on how to fix these issues, which he is, that Donald Trump is known for that is one of his biggest strengths is he sits down and he hears both sides. He hears the argument and then he makes a decision. He's not somebody out there that thinks he knows everything, doesn't listen to the experts, and just does what he wants. Despite what the left has been saying about him, he doesn't do that. In fact, that's what we have now with Joe Biden and co, is where they just do what they want. The experts come up with an executive order, they put it under his nose, and he signs it. And Kamala Harris will be exactly the same. I think people need to realize that Kamala Harris is Joe Biden 2.0. Whatever policy she supported before she started flip-flopping is what she actually supports. She's only been lying to try and trick people into voting for her. I mean, that's the only thing it could be. She was either lying then or she's lying now. Either way, she's lying. And based off of her record from govtrack.org or whatever website that is that got completely scrubbed once Kamala was nominated, that should tell you everything you need to know. She was the most liberal senator in the Senate. That's who she is. And so when she gets elected, if she gets elected, it's going to be Joe Biden, but worse. It's not going to stay the same. It's going to get worse, progressively worse. Especially you're talking about government price controls. That's insane. So not only is Donald Trump bringing on this coalition of people like RFK Jr., the Bernie Trump voters are coming back, the anti-military industrial complex like Tulsi Gabbard, I think this is actually a pretty big deal as well. So it's not just the Bernie voter. It's not just the Bernie Trump voters. Trump won over voters from the largest Native American tribe in North Carolina. Yeah. So for years, the Native American Lumbee vote was a Democratic stronghold in North Carolina, but things are changing. Robinson County, a rural majority minority county in the southern battleground state, is home to the largest Native American tribe east of the Mississippi. The Lumbee, I think I'm pronouncing it right, I don't know, it's Lumbee, who account for about 42% of the county's population. For many years, leaning toward a blue vote was considered a part of their culture. But in 2016 and in 2020, Robinson County voted for Donald Trump. And how is he doing it? So how is he getting all these disaffected voters on board? Because he's listening. He's actually learning, which is amazing. Because he's not a politician like that, man. He wasn't born and raised in D.C. like these corrupt politicians that we have. The guy actually is on a learning trajectory. He's sitting down and listening to RFK Jr. He's sitting down and listening to Tulsi Gabbard. And he's listening to what they have to say and how to fix these issues. That's how things get fixed, ladies and gentlemen. That's how coalitions are formed and things actually get better for the American people. That is how the American people come first. And if that's what it takes, then Donald Trump's got my vote. I'm not going to sit here and hate one man more than I hate my own suffering. Because that's essentially what the media is convinced the other side to do. If you're voting for Kamala Harris, the media has somehow convinced you to hate Donald Trump more than you hate your own suffering. Because that is what we're going through right now, is suffering. For the last 3.5 years, we've had high gas prices, high grocery prices, high insurance prices, high housing costs. I mean, go down the list. It has been nothing but suffering for the last 3.5 years. And so what in the hell would convince people to vote for another 4 years of it, if not for the media convincing people to hate a particular man for whatever reason? Unless you convinced people to hate Donald Trump more than you hate rigged primaries, more than you hate high gas prices and high housing prices and high insurance prices, that's the only way. And so therefore, that's why I say the media has psychologically and emotionally broken the people on the left, the Harris voters, because they offer nothing good. Their policies suck. They have no ideas. All they do is talk about hating Donald Trump, and that is what they think they're going to win an election on, and I'm sorry. The American people are smarter than that, man. The Biden administration and the Harris administration and the Harris campaign think the American people are dumb, man. They really do. They think Kamala could just come out and flip-flop and say one thing and actually mean another, and say one thing 2 years ago but actually support another thing. They think the American people aren't paying attention. And I'm sorry, I just don't believe that. I think the American people are paying attention more now than they ever have before. I think you're going to have the Roganites come out for Donald Trump. I think you're going to have the Gabbards come out for Donald Trump and the RFKs come out for Trump. I think you're going to see this massive, massive coalition party, this coalition government coming together and working on the issues for the American people. And when you're completely switching entire counties from blue to red, when you're switching Native American tribes, but I thought Donald Trump was some racist bigot, but yet somehow the Native American tribe, the largest Native American tribe in North Carolina, is endorsing Donald Trump and voted for him in 2020? No, there's something bigger going on here, man. Something big is going on. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's almost like I said, they are underpolling, they're undervaluing the silent majority of people out there that are just sick and tired of the insanity. But I think there's something big happening right underneath our nose, and the pollsters can't see it, the Kamala campaign can't see it, and not even the Trump campaign can see it. But I think there's going to be this massive wave of just independents and Roganites and RFK voters and disaffected women Democrats that are coming out in support of Gabbard, because Donald Trump has named Gabbard and RFK Jr. as honorary transition members. So they're going to be part of Donald Trump's cabinet, man. Whatever team they work on, I have no idea. Whether it's the FDA for RFK and the military-industrial complex for Tulsi Gabbard, the House and Homeland Security, I don't know. But apparently these are two pretty good experts in their field, and they're going to know exactly how to fix these issues. Certainly RFK will. And I don't doubt that they will fix these issues pretty damn quick, especially if Donald Trump gets this coalition government like we are wanting. I think there's a lot of millions of people out there that are just sick and tired of the insanity. And I think it's Donald Trump learning what he's learned in the past year, learning how to just listen and how to just expect that other people know what to do. Like, he doesn't have to have control all the time. And I think he's always had this ability because being in construction, making investments, when you're investing millions of dollars on a skyscraper, you're going to want to sit down and listen to the experts. Donald Trump's not just going to go out there and be like, oh yeah, I want this beam here instead of here. No, he has to listen to the structural engineers because they know something he doesn't. And I think that's Donald Trump's strong suit. I think there's a lot of appealing things to Donald Trump, but him listening to both sides, hearing the arguments, and then making a decision, that's a pretty strong suit of Donald Trump. And I think only the people benefit from that, man. I mean, because he does have a gut feeling, and I think he's going to listen to both sides and then make a gut decision. And I don't think his gut is wrong on a whole lot, to be honest. I think he's been pretty accurate these last almost decade. I mean, pretty much everything he said came true. Either sooner or later, it came true. So, but I'm starting to see a lot of interesting things happen, and I can't tell you how excited I am for this coalition kind of movement unfolding within the MAGA movement. It's exciting to me, man, to actually see something historic taking place. It's like something we're going to be talking to our grandkids about around the campfire or around the fireplace. Is about when both sides came together. They put aside their partisan politics, they came together and actually solved the issues that were plaguing the American people. That's the story I want to be able to tell my grandkids, is how we all came together and told the other side, told the rhinos, told the establishment Democrats, and told the bureaucrats and the swamp creatures to go screw themselves, that we're getting our country back. I think that would be an awesome story to tell our grandkids one day, man. There's a lot of other things I wanted to get into. Donald Trump is once again being targeted by Jack Smith with this ridiculous lawfare. I didn't even want to really give it any credit because who cares? You guys remember like a couple episodes ago I said that people have been so kind of desensitized by Donald Trump's lawfare. Like, these people can give Donald Trump 1,000 indictments and people are just like, yeah, whatever. It's like, yeah, here we go again. They're trying to kneecap Donald Trump 6 weeks before the election. Big deal. It's like, I mean, don't these people see this? I mean, I know Democrats want to pretend like Donald Trump committed all these crimes, but I find it very hard to believe when the same people that fed us the Russia collusion hoax that Donald Trump somehow committed an impeachable offense with a phone call to Ukraine and all the other crap that they lied to us about, I'm not listening to those people anymore. I think every single one of these cases against Donald Trump is going to get turned over eventually, but they're not going to get turned over to after the election. And I think they're using this lawfare against Donald Trump to influence the election so that people like Jessica Tarlov and Joe and me can go out and be like, oh my God, he's got 35 indictments and he's a felon, he's all this other stuff. But sane, rational people can see exactly what's going on. You mean to tell me that Donald Trump is the only person in Washington, D.C. that has committed a crime? If you were to investigate any one of those people in Washington, D.C. for a fraction of the cost and time and energy they spend investigating Donald Trump, the damn place would be a ghost town because everybody would be in jail. So you're not going to sit there and convince me that Donald Trump is this great criminal of Washington politics. You had freaking Barack Obama drone striked innocent American people, man. With no due process. Just murdered them with a drone. Like, I can't just go murder my enemies with a drone. Why did he get to do it? No trial, no due process, just bombed them. American citizens? You know, they say, oh yeah, that they were part of some terrorist group, whatever, but don't you think maybe that's why we have Guantanamo Bay for? That maybe we have due process? Obama comes in and just drone strikes them, vaporizes them? No. That's not a crime? You mean to tell me that Eric Holder, that was supposed to report to a congressional subpoena, doesn't report to a congressional subpoena and nothing happens to him? That's not a crime? Operation Fast and Furious, that wasn't a crime? Like, so we see, the American people see all these crimes being committed in Washington, D.C., but we only see one side being held accountable. I think it's all a load of bullcrap, and I think the American people can see it. They see this lawfare for exactly what it is lawfare in order to influence a federal election, to try and kneecap Donald Trump weeks before going into the election so that they can win power. That's what this is. So that's why I didn't want to give the Jack Smith indictment too much credit. They just lied to the American people over and over and over again for the past 8 years. It's what I tried expressing to one of my buddies at work when he's talking about they have all this faith in government, like the government institutions are all of a sudden beacons of credibility and beacons of integrity. It's like, wait a minute. When I was a Democrat, we hated the establishment. We hated the FBI for what they did for what they did to Martin Luther King. We hated the FDA. We hated the ATF for Ruby Ridge. Like, we hated all these establishments, Big Pharma. And now all of a sudden Democrats love them? They have become the party of Big Ag, Big Pharma. They have become the party of institutionalism. They have become the party of pro-establishment. All of it. They have become everything they claim to hate. It's almost like that phrase from Harvey Dent on The Dark Knight, where he says, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself be the villain. That's pretty much what the Democrats are. It's like they had it right there, man. They were the party of the working class. They were the party of the people. They were the party of anti-war, anti-establishment. And they became so obsessed with keeping and retaining power that they just started, they were having to adopt all these other different factions because they kept losing so many people in their party. So then now they got to bring in the pro-Hamas people. They got to bring in they got to bring in the radical leftists. They got to bring in the BLM. They got to bring in all these different factions. And this is what you get. You get a party that stands for nothing and everything at the same time. They have no morals, no principles. They'll literally tell you that they want to ban fracking one day and the next day say, oh, I love fracking. Or they'll flip-flop on things like we've never even seen before. So, anyways, all right, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. I want you guys to have a good day. Have a great week. TGIF. God bless you. And God bless America. And long live the Republic. You guys have a good one. Bye-bye.